just to let you know. So you can try singing if singing is your thing, but you can also use recorded music.
Welcome back to our channel, and thank you once again for joining us in this another day in the life of living on Autistic Edge. I am Terry and Elaine.
And I am Lowenfield Elaine.
And we are here to share with you tips and tricks of how we navigate through our journey right here on Autistic Edge.
This week we'll continue in our series at looking at parental challenges, and we'll be looking at sensory sensitivity. That's what we'll be focusing on this week. Do you want to lead out and say?
Sensory sensitivity.
Yes.
Name kind of hard because alright. What is sensory sensitivity? Now, sensory sensitivity is when someone has a heightened sensitivity. No, you don't use the same word to define the word, right? So we can say when somebody has a strong reaction to certain stimuli within the environment, all right? And managing the sensory sensitivity in children on the autism spectrum, it involves creating a supportive environment and implementing strategies to help them to cope with the sensory stimuli.
Yes.
Now, what you find is that sometimes they are not able to regulate themselves without engaging in certain activities like jumping, screaming, crying, displaying signs of heightened fear, and sometimes these behaviors end up into a meltdown.
Yes.
All right. So that's kind of a summary in the sensory sensitivity. Sensory sensitivity can affect parents in a very negative way. When the child gets into these heightened fear, screaming, and you really don't know what the situation is, and you don't know what to do, because it's so uncontrollable for these little ones. And can you imagine if an adult would have sensitivity, right?
Yes.
But it's just it's an emotion that it's uncontrollable for those kids, and they tend to do whatever reaction it takes to cope or to regulate themselves.
Right.
They are going to do it. Now, to parents, it seems very stupid. If you're in public, you're gonna feel ashamed, embarrassed, and all those kind of things.
Yes.
I mean, and it happens so frequently and sometimes without even any reason, and it's difficult to tell. All right, so this week we're gonna talk about some of the strategies that you can use to manage the sensory sensitivity. Now, needless to tell you, we have gone through some of these situations with Alex Xavier as well. Alex Xavier has heightened sensitivity to loud noise. So if he's in an area where the sound or whatever system is just too loud, you will see him sticking his fingers in the air, or he will be covering his ears. At one point we had issue with closed tabs, right? And we had water issues, and that's just to name a few. And he will just have meltdown and you're not even sure what exactly it is. No, this is something that we really had to navigate through. Now we're going to look at how you can manage or cope through this sensory sensitivity. So dear, you want to tell us?
Right, just before we get into the tips, I want to talk to some of those parents who are just discovering that their child is on the spectrum. Don't be fearful if you see some of these signs being displayed, or even if you're not sure if your child is on the spectrum, you can look out for some of these things as signs that you may need to have a diagnosis being done.
And the truth is, I mean, your typical children would go through some amount of heightened sensitivity from time to time.
Right.
But children on the autism spectrum, it's worse. It's really more, and because they are not able to even understand themselves, then the reaction may seem a little bit more overwhelming.
Right.
That a little bit is much more overwhelming.
Right, and then it becomes even more challenging if the child is non-verbal.
Yeah,
and to
so
be
they are not
displaying
able.
some of these emotions and actions as well. So let us dive in. Let us look at the first tip that we have for you today. The first one is try to identify triggers.
Yeah, that's
What
very important.
What are some of the things that you observe that whenever this thing happens, then the child behaves in a particular manner? So it's important for you to recall from memory, or even introduce the child into the situation to see if the behavior is repeated, that sort of thing. So you have to learn to identify that trigger. What stimulus or stimuli causes the child to behave in a particular manner? It may be sounds,
Right.
it may be textures, it may be smells, it may be a particular behavior such as
Right.
shouting, it may be tags on their clothing in
Yes.
Alex Xavier's case, and it may be colors, as I will have explained in another video about taking Alex Xavier to the supermarket and just having the colors and the people around him, etc. Those
Right.
sort of things are things that you can identify as stimuli that may trigger a particular behavior. So that's the first thing that I would encourage you to do. See if you can identify the triggers for the behavior.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the some of the behavior too can help you to tell you exactly what the sensitivity is. So, for example, when a child has heightened sensitivity to some things, they can be socially awkward, right? So, for example, Alex Xavier, he likes a good smelling cologne.
Yes.
So if somebody comes along and they have on a nice cologne, and once Alex smells that cologne, he's going to be all over you and he will hug you and he'll just want to, get a sense of that cologne. No, they do not really understand the inappropriate personal space, right?
Yes.
They do not understand the importance of personal space. So it may seem inappropriate when you see them coming over. And we're sharing this because persons out there can understand, because I mean, people have a fear of these children.
Yes.
Sometimes just by seeing them coming close to them, it's very intimidating, and you may be tempted to push them. Some children will run away from them when they see them.
Yes.
But just to understand, these are some of the sensitivity issues. They may just see something that they're attracted to and they're going to be all over it.
Yes.
All right. Now, another tip to manage the sensory sensitivity, and that is to create a sensory friendly environment. In this video up here, we talk about creating quiet space, right? Modify your environment in such a way to reduce the sensory overload.
Yes.
So if you know the child is sensitive to light, you may want to put in like dimmable switch. Now, you can also minimize background noise. And one of the way you can do that, if you're in an environment where you are able to control the noise. So say you're at home on a Sunday morning and you're playing a nice gospel music and you play on top. Now you can turn down that music. But if you are somewhere where you have no control over the noise, you can use the noise cancelling headsets, and that is for those who are tolerable to the headsets, because some children will not put the headsets over their head, right? So those are some of the things you can do. Look at the texture of our material of whatever bedding or sofa that you have in your house, and so create the space. You know what your child like. Create a space to make some comfort.
I want to build on what you were just saying there around this sensory friendly environment, and just talk about some of those tools that would be in that environment.
Yeah,
So
go right ahead.
You mentioned noise cancelling headphones, maybe one weighted blankets is
that too.
another one. You have different fidget toys, fidget spinners, and those. So there's a host of different fidget toys that are available on the internet that you can purchase, etc.
And we use singing at one point for Alex as well, because sometimes when he gets into that meltdown mode and we're not even sure what is happening, we have some of his favorite songs because he likes to sing. Once he starts singing one of those songs, you may just hear him started humming in a crying mode, and then he will join us along and we'll just have a little sing along. And that soothes him as well.
If you can't sing, you can use recorded music. Just to let you know. So you can try singing if singing is your thing, but you can also use recorded music if that. So those are just some of the sensory tools that you can use in collaboration with the sensory environment that you create for the child.
You notice how my husband stress on the singing. If you can't sing, I won't say anything more. Alright? Now, another thing you can do is to provide sensory breaks.
Yes.
So if you're doing activities and the activities are pretty lengthy, so say for example they're at school or daycare or wherever you have them, wherever they spend most of their time, or you're doing an activity and you find that the child is going into a meltdown, it may be church, and you find the child going into a meltdown, give them a break from the environment, right? Just take them out of that area where they're having the meltdown or they're going into this heightened fear, and bring them to somewhere. Alex like outdoors, so there was a point when we normally have a whole heap of heightened fear and crying and all that stuff, and we just never know what to do. And guess what? Sometimes just a walk in the outdoor did very well for him. I remember when we were in COVID, in the lockdown, not being able to go out and do our road trips like we would have normally do. And we find that Alex just have heightened sensitivity during that time. And what we find is a good walk outdoor, and if you have a pool, take him and go for a little short swim and all of that. We realize that those little things really help.
I want to introduce a term there, and it's the term stimming. So stimming is a term that is used whenever the child is overstimulated. So it may not necessarily be that they have sensitivity. It may mean that there's too much stimulation, and when they become overstimulated, then they'll do what is known as stimming. So stimming can present itself in many things. It may be the back and forth in terms of the running, it may be the hand flapping, it may be the feet stomping, it may be beating on themselves. All of those are ways that stimming will show up. So try not to have the child be overstimulated with any one particular thing, because then they'll start to play out in that particular way where they use the stimming as a mechanism to cope.
And as you mentioned the stimming there, just to also note that the sensory sensitivity, it can either be oversensitivity or it can be under. So you can write hyperactive or hypoactive if there is such word. So you can have hyperactivity and you can have hypoactivity, which means that they are understimulating something and they may need some more of that sensory input to regulate them properly. So it can be too much and it can be too little.
All right, so the next thing is to practice, as we're looking at desensitization.
Tell me about that one.
That is where you gradually reduce the exposure to certain stimulus. So as we talk about
like light is a good one.
Yes, that is desensitizing. And then you wanna do this in a controlled kind of way, because sometimes you don't wanna go from one extreme to the next.
So like for example, I made reference to the light as an example. Because if the child has sensitivity to bright lights and you put in dimmer bulbs, right now what can happen is you can gradually increase the light say on a daily basis. So tonight you may want to put him in dim for a week, and then next week you put the same dim, but you may increase it a little bit. So that is slowly introducing them to much more brighter or acceptable lighting space. You can do the same thing with sound, not to introduce them to too much of a loud sound, but then of course you can introduce them to, if you're going to an area, it's good to introduce them to some of these sensitivity and to kind of help them to regulate, because when you are in certain areas where you really can't have a control over, then it's important to be able to quickly, desensitize or to help them to manage through.
Right. And I'll just give another example too, because we knew that crowds were a challenge for Alexander. So what we did was we did smaller settings, introducing to that, and then you increase gradually. We've never taken him in a long time to any large
very large events.
We don't know how we'll cope with that now, because it's been a few years, but we can probably look to try and see what happens there.
But we can see though that we have had improvement, because I mean, normally when we go to church, Alex would be running up and down all over on the outside. We are having much more balance now. He sits in church for a longer period, and like for example last week after church, he was able to rock with a few of the folks, and he never get very never agitated at all.
Right.
So he was much more balanced and stuff. So we are seeing the improvement, and it's because we don't keep him locked in. We are always going out with him. He's our little handbag. We don't leave him go anywhere except we're going to work, or it is highly important that we're going to somewhere where it may not be practical for him to go. But outside of that, we take him everywhere so that he can be introduced to the different environments, because guess what? That is important life skills. This is life, and he's going to be a part of it.
I agree.
All right. Another tip where you can use to manage sensory sensitivity, and that is through communication and social stories. Now, we talk about in a previous video, use visual aids with our children to help them to learn. Now, visual aids and social story, you can use this to communicate understanding. So when you tell like a social story, you can talk about a particular event, help them to understand. So say for example, the child has a fear of dog, right? And you want to you can create a social story about dog. So you tell them about the dog, you tell them about the importance of having dog around the house, and they can be there for security. You can do a little introduction to the dog, and when you do these things, you might find them, peradventure you're telling them that story, and they may eventually want to touch the dog. Initially they might be afraid of the furry animals, but they warm up to it. So you can use social stories as a means of communicating some of these sensory issues, so you can talk about them through social stories. All right? You agree with that one, dear? Yeah, and I mean, I remember Alex went into, where were we? Was in Walmart when we traveled one of the time, and Alex, while walking around, he picks up a cushion.
Yes.
And that's the cushion over there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so here is the cushion that Alex bought. And the cushion had sequins, so he just liked the idea of rubbing his hands over this and see the sequins lying down to one side, and then he will push it back and it lying down to the other side. The other side is just more like regular cushion. But what he likes about it was the sequence. Now we use this cushion when we realized that he liked it, we kept it. And for every now and again, if he's lying down and he gets in a little, agitated mood, probably not to the extreme, and he started rubbing against his cushion, then he may just have a calm down from his meltdown.
All right. So the other tip we want to share with you is about being open and flexible. You have to try different approaches. If you try one thing and it doesn't work, try something else. Don't throw your hands up in the air. Don't give up. If you try one strategy and all you're doing is learning, you'll learn that this strategy doesn't work, so you move on to strategy
And another thing too there is when you say be flexible in trying strategy. When we went into Walmart, remember we always operate on a budget. We never had it in mind to buy any cushion.
Yes.
But you know, when Alex is not the child who would go in and pick up things and throw in the trolley, he will just be walking around. As a matter of fact, I don't think he likes shopping. So the quicker you can get out, it might be very easier for him, unless he finds something that will, you know, keep him occupied. So when he took up this cushion, you know, for some parents would have said, "Me nah no money to buy that," and what could have happened is we could have struck a compromise, because probably we never have enough money to buy it, or we never go to Walmart to buy a cushion. Alright, it wasn't expensive. I think this probably was about $2 something there. It never enough money, about $2 something. Right? But when he took it up, and of course I look at the price and see that it was alright, it was okay, it fitted my budget. And I never seen him pick up a cushion before or anything, but then when I realized he started doing this on it, I said, "Okay, do you want that?" And he looked up at me. At that time he was non-verbal, and he looked at me and I said, "Okay, go ahead and put it in the cart." So sometimes you can be flexible, look at what it is that they are interested in, and then you can find out, because I wouldn't have known that he was interested in sequencing, in this type of sequence material, if Alex had not picked that up himself in the shopping.
Right. And remember, as we share these tips and around the different sensory toys and so on that you can use, remember that it's not a one size fits all. What worked for us may not necessarily work for your child. So that's what we mean in terms of being adaptable and being willing to switch and to try different things, right? So we can't prescribe a way for you to do this, but we can help you to at least open your awareness in terms of how you should look at what it is.
Right, and when you're seeing these signs, then you have a better understanding as how to deal with them, rather than you yourself as parents or caregivers or even teachers become overwhelmed with the situation. Because understanding the situation and have an idea what to do, it's more helping to regulate fluid mental space too. Because it's not easy. Now, one of the last things that I would say is collaborate with your professional. Talk to your occupational therapist, or whichever one of your therapists or your doctors, educators. Work together so that they can understand the behavior, and if behavior happens at school that you, the parents, may not know about, work along with the school should be able to tell you about these behaviors. And strategies like these, they can be implemented in school, they can be implemented at home. And our churches are another common place where we would go. I mean, churches can also look at the opportunity of creating little sensory areas, whether it's in the Sabbath school or the Sunday school area. Create sensory areas for some of these children, so that when they come around and they may have a little meltdown or so, this can be something that you have to help them as they go along, just to make their life a little bit easier. Thank you once again for joining us in this another day in the life of living on Autistic Edge. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit the notification bell so the next time we put out another content, you will be notified.